Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining today's webinar. I'm Laura Milojevic. I am the Director of Marketing and Business at Simplify. Today, we're excited to have our principal consultant, Dan Skinzeel, sorry, discussing and demoing SAP Analytics Cloud for planning, getting a handle on formulas. Also, when the webinar concludes, a short survey is going to appear. So if you can, please fill that out. We really appreciate all the feedback. We want to make our webinars as good for you as they can be. So afterwards, feel free to reach out to Dan or myself, if you have any questions. And now I will hand it over to Dan and he can get started.
Okay, thanks, Lauren. I'll just put my camera on here for a short bit, just so you can put a face with a name for those that don't know me. Yes, it is pronounced Skinzel. So yes, Dan Skinzel. I'm with Simplify Solutions. Been with Simplify for about 4 years now, but before that have about 25 plus years in corporate finance, FP&A positions, planning and forecasting processes, and leading those parts of the organization. But I always found myself going to the technical side of the job, so that's why I'm here with Simplify now, because I get to share that with other organizations and see all the different organizations out there. So something I really enjoy doing, and hopefully that'll come through here for you in the webinar. So enough looking at me. I'll turn off the camera now. We can get into the slides here. I want to talk a little bit about Simplify, just to give you a quick intro for those that may not know us well. We are based out of Chicago and also have an office in Montreal. And we are an SAP implementation partner. And we are staffed with a lot of folks like myself who have that business background on the functional side, but have that technology bent that really migrate toward that area and like to take that business knowledge and provide value to our clients through implementing tools like SAC or BPC, other things like that you can see listed here on the page, group reporting, BW, data warehouse cloud, etc. We do focus on the customer's business content. We'll offer implementation services, training, also staff augmentation to fill in those gaps, and administering systems, etc. We also have on our website, and this has been very well received by the business community, as people are really starting to look toward SAC to satisfy their business needs from a forecasting, planning, and even consolidations standpoint. We have many prepackaged content solutions on our website, ranging from sales and revenue planning to costing of those products, full P&L consolidations, HR or workforce planning, CapEx planning, balance sheet cash flow, you name it. We've put together prepackaged content that will help you get started and get started quickly. So I invite you to follow that link that you see on the screen here, and this deck will be made available to you later if you'd like it, so no need to write it down at this point. But with that, just to take it one step further, just to share with you kind of where we focus our attention from an organization internally here. We have some experts, our client partners, who are, yes, they know the broad array of business, but some of them focus in particular areas here, like Jarrett down here in CapEx, and Eric in HR planning, John in pipeline sales, and Beth in end-to-end planning. But we all touch the different aspects here, but client partners work closely with you and help us fit those tools to meet your needs. So, okay, so we are here to talk about advanced formulas, not talk about Dan or talk about Simplify anymore. We'll get into the advanced formulas now. So With that, I want to preface the advanced formulas and really what they are before we get into a demo to kind of demonstrate the power of them and the ease that they can be put together. So today we are going to talk about advanced formulas in SAC. And as we think about SAC or SAP Analytics Cloud, one of the things it's going to do, it's used a lot for planning, and we can do a lot of calculations in it, but you can do calculations at varying levels of the tool. For those that are familiar with the tool, with SAC, and I'm going to make that assumption that you are if you are looking at a webinar on advanced formulas, is that when you have a story, you can do calculations directly within a story. For example, pulling in a revenue line item and a cost of goods sold line item, and then putting in a calculation directly on the sheet, on that table, to calculate a profit margin, percentage. That can all be done, and that all renders as soon as that data is brought into the page. We can also put formulas directly in the dimension or the account dimension for a specific ID to maybe pull two accounts together, or to do that same exact calculation that we did on the table. We could also do that in the account dimension for a account called gross margin, for example. But what we can use in SAC to really take things to the next level are what we call advanced formulas. So what are they? They really are the backbone of what I call the off-story calculations that we perform in SAC. Okay, so those are going to be the things that provide a great amount of flexibility, as opposed to doing just some of those simple calculations that you may encounter on a table or a spreadsheet. We can also store the results of those calculations as data within the model, or we could even, through these calculations, generate a piece of data as a variable that we kind of use temporarily within a advanced calculation. But these calculations or these advanced formulas, they don't operate in and of themselves. They sit within something called data actions. So I'm going to use that term fairly often, because that's really the place that is going to hold the data actions, or the advanced formulas. Okay, so when we look at data actions, these are going to be this is the vehicle that's going to execute those advanced formulas. We can have various steps within a data action that each step consisting of different advanced formulas. We can run those advanced formulas then on specific data sets. And again, you can see that this is not really things that you can do directly in your story pages. We can also bring different data actions together into a single data action. So we can have one data action call out another data action. Again, all of those data actions having their own advanced formulas. And data actions are really going to be designed by modelers and then executed by the planners. So maybe you have a system administrator or a power user in a certain area of the business that would maintain these types of things. And then the users of the tool, the planners, the FP&A analyst that is going to generate a forecast or a plan, is going to use your stories and trigger the data actions that you have produced. Okay, so within the data actions, there's several types of data actions that are available, and we can combine these within single data actions. So if you look at the upper right of the screen, if you're familiar with data actions at all, and we'll see this in the demo, but once we get into it, you'll see that you can add certain steps to a data action, and there are different kinds of steps. You have a copy step, which is just going to move data around from one area of the model to another. based on a certain data region or dimensionality that you would ask of it. We can also move data between models. We can perform some calculations in one model, then pull that data, pull those results or any of the data from model A into model B. So we can go across models. SAC also has an allocation process that is outside of the data action or advanced formula area, but it's just going to do some of the basic allocation methods for you. We can bring those into data actions as well and execute those from the data actions. And as I mentioned earlier, we can combine data actions, and the term for that would be an embedded data action. So we'll touch on that quickly as well. And for those using a new model and have a currency conversion enabled, you can also add currency conversion steps to these data actions as well. But the one at the bottom that's bolded there, obviously, is the advanced formula step, and that's what we're going to focus on today. And really, this is going to be the most flexible of all of the steps. It's really going to be where you can kind of, again, bring your planning or forecasting or analysis setup to the next level that are going to fit your specific business needs. So if we look at some of the capabilities of advanced formulas, what are they going to do for me? They can do lots of things. They can do lots of transformations and calculations. Like I said earlier, we can define what we call a scope, and which means just setting a certain data set that we're going to run these calculations on. We'll also look at a way to do these and construct these calculations in a visual format. So you don't really need coding skills necessarily to build these. That's why I said you could have a power user, say, out in a business unit that you kind of turn loose on data actions and stories because maybe their business is unique from the rest of the organization, and they need a different model with some different calculations, and they are going to maintain it. So maybe you have that FP&A user that's going to develop some basic calculations as well. We can also have users interact with these advanced formulas and data actions by setting up parameters. And that's where the users are going to give us information that we're going to use in the advanced formulas. We can always use different variables in the calculations as well. It's also going to help us build out the syntax when we look at the data action step, and we'll get that in a moment as we get into the demo. And it can also do very complex calculations as well. The way I like to view it as coming from corporate finance is I have not, up to this point, found anything that I couldn't do in Excel that I could do in Excel that I can't do in SAC. Yes, it's not going to be, it's going to be different, but you can do the calculations. It's just a matter of putting all the pieces in the right place. So one thing that you see on the screen, on the right side here, this colorful area, this is taken directly from the SAC Help. And there is a link to it, or the textual link to it at the bottom that's called about script formulas and calculations in advanced formulas for planning. What this is all these boxes are clickable that talk about the various aspects of the advanced formulas. And when you follow these links, it's going to give you the syntax of things, it's going to give you examples, it's going to give you business scenarios, it's going to really help you walk through those types of things. And that's going to help with, especially on the scripting side of things. And that's one area that SAC is good at, and that's providing assistance and helping you through the programming of these advanced formulas. So continuing on with the assistance here, this is within SAC in the upper right of anyone's SAC tenant browser, you're going to see these icons in the upper right. And one of those is going to be the question mark. And if you click on that, depending upon where you are at in SAC, when you click on that help becomes contextual as well. So for example, I clicked on this, and then there's a box that's not on here, but that takes you to the help screen. I was in a data action screen, and the help that it gave me was starting with data actions, or creating your first data actions. So it knows where you're at and is very helpful in that manner. So if you go to that help area and just enter advanced formulas, you get a whole slew of help topics that can be used. Like I said, extensive SAC help documentation here, a lot of syntax examples, and even some specific business scenarios like what do I do to calculate depreciation, or how do I do sales eliminations in here with advanced formulas. So very, very helpful in that area. So as we get into the actual data action, before we dive into the demo, like I said, there are a couple different ways that we can design an advanced formula step. And as I like to say, is it to script or not to script? And these really are available for a couple different level of users that I've kind of touched on already. But if we look at the visual side, which is on the left, those are really targeted toward business users. That person out in the business unit I was referring to that really needs to put some calculations together so that their BU can get their forecast completed and get that into corporate. There really are no coding skills, and we'll see that shortly, that we'll put together a basic data action and not touch a line of code. And it really is, it's created by dragging and dropping. So it's very beneficial for that type of environment. Now, those that have a little more experience on the coding side, you can just jump right into the script. It does require a little bit of coding knowledge. We know that there's a lot of different languages out there, but we also know that there's a lot of similarities across some of those languages. And that's the case here as well. So we do have the two different types here. So it really depends on where you are at and which one you would choose. So just a quick layout or definition of the layouts here of the screens. We would start a advanced formula step using the visual method. It's kind of divided into sections here. Up in the top, we have something called a context. We could also call that the scope definition, which is what it's more referred to on the scripting side. We also can set some configuration for the advanced formula step as well that will pertain to everything that would fall below it as far as calculations go. And then at the bottom, we have where we would do our calculations and data writing. Okay. Now let's contrast that with the scripting step. And you can see if I go back and forth, you see there's really not much different in the layout. Yes, these kind of are flipped here, but it's really the same type of setup. You're gonna have your configuration here, and we're also going to have what we call our scope definition, and then also our calculations and data writing. Okay. So one thing, and I'll show you that momentarily, is in the demo, is that it's a good way to learn the scripting is, if you're starting out, is to start here, and then you can flip over to the script side and see what the resulting script is from your visual build. So we'll show you that as well. Another thing I talked about was the parameters. And these are things where we are going to allow our users to interact with the data action for the advanced formula that we build. The only default parameter that's required is the version, meaning, is it the forecast, or is it budget, or is it actuals? That's going to be required, and that's something the user is always going to have to enter, unless, of course, you set it as something that's fixed in the data action, and then they will not have to do that. But with these parameters, we can pull in members, meaning a specific dimension member ID from a particular dimension. Maybe it's a cost center or a profit center, depending upon the data action we're running. But this really gives us the flexibility to build out advanced formulas within data actions that allow them to be used over and over, repeatedly, and for different areas of the business. So that is very beneficial, and we will go through how to build out those parameters as well. So then lastly, all of this sits inside a data action, but the data actions don't run by themselves unless, of course, as I have in parentheses there, you can schedule those on a calendar, the calendaring function within SAC. But most of the time, your users are going to interact with data actions by executing them on what is called a data action trigger. So many of you may have seen what these are on stories. They just look these little boxes here with the little blue play button. And that is really what is going to trigger the data action. So when a user clicks on this, they are going to get a box that prompts them for any parameters that we're asking them for. They'll complete that, click OK, and then the data action will execute. Okay, so that is pretty much a summary of the advanced formulas and how they reside in data actions, and then how we execute those data actions. So what I would like to do now is to jump into the live demo, and we can start to build some advanced formulas. So let me just grab that. Okay. Hopefully everyone can see my screen there. Let me blow this up a little bit for you. Okay. So when you log into SAC, you're going to always be brought to your home screen here. So now you've been tasked with building a data action or building an advanced formula to perform a calculation for your business. So where do I start? If we look at the layout here, a few updates ago, this menu bar was added here. And to expand it so you can really see what's going on, you can click on the little, I've heard it called hamburger, waffle, layer of books, 3 lines, whatever. But you can click on that and it's going to reveal all the items here that you have access to. Your list may look different here. But we're going to click on data actions. And when we get that, I'll just get rid of this here, give some more room. If you've already built some, you're going to, if your organization has them, you're going to have a whole list of things here. But we are going to create a new data action. So when we click on that new or create data action box, we are given a blank canvas here to start working, building out a data action. And you can see it's an unnamed data action. So one of the first things we're going to have to do is we're going to give this thing a name. So let's call this advanced formula demo. I'll just call it V1 in case I have anything out there. But we also need to then attach it to a specific model. Okay, so we need to tell it where the data actions are going to be connected to or what they're going to run on. So we're going to connect this to a model. And we do that here by just clicking on the little link. As soon as that pops up, I can search for my model. Okay, so I just know I have one named like that, and we'll just go here. Okay, so now we've named our data action, attached it to a model. So all we got to do is click save here. Okay, so now that we've established the data action or the data action shell, because there's really nothing here that it's going to do at this moment, let me just run through really quickly the navigation here within the data action. There's some obvious things here, which is where we're at now with the general kind of the settings, but there's the save and the undo and redo. Once you have data action steps, which will show up in this blank area here, we can also copy them, delete them, and so on, but they're kind of grayed out now because there's no actions there or no steps. We can also, this is where we would create our parameters, and we'll come back to this later. And now here, these are the various steps that we can add to the data action that I had talked about earlier. So here's your copy step, your cross-model copy step, your allocation step. This is where you would add a embedded data action step. If you have that currency enabled in your new model, then you could use this step. But where we are going to focus is here on the advanced formula step. Okay, so all we have to do to start one is just to click on it once, and you can see that immediately it's going to take us to something that should look a little bit familiar from what we looked at a few minutes ago. This is the visual step of the advanced formula. So it will give you just a blank name here, or a out of the box name. What we can do first is just name this, and just as we get into the calculation, just so we're not going into this blindly, just to give you a little business scenario, let's just say, it's into the third quarter and we're looking to prepare our system to start out the budget for the next year. So what we want to do is we want to take and, as I would call it, seed that budget with some historical data. Maybe put some parameters around that, like an assumed growth rate in our sales. Okay, so we want to, instead of manually uploading or doing a whole bunch of manual effort, we have the data there, so let's use that as our baseline and then kind of pivot off of that to pre-populate our budget. So let's do that by saying, okay, I'm just going to label this as visual because we will do a script version of it. I'll just say seed budget data. We'll go with that. Okay. You can add a description here if you would like. It's not required. Actually, the name is not required either. You could still keep that there. But what we'll do here is let's add some context to this. Let's add a way to kind of make the data set a little smaller. We want to hone in on something very specific. So we're going to look at gross sales because that's what we're going to populate here. So we're going to go to our account dimension and we're going to choose gross sales. And I also want to, since I'm getting ready for the, say, 2022 budget, I also want to add a time dimension to that. Okay, so I'm going to put 2022 there. That will kind of limit things for us. Okay, we could add some variables here, and variables are a little more advanced. So if we have some time at the end, I could, if there's questions on those or what have you, I could address some of that, but we'll leave that alone for now. Now this area here where it says begin, this is where you have your configuration items. You could click on any of these. Actually, not click on, you need to click the pencil, but you can change this, flip calendar year to fiscal year if that's how your model is set up. You could do the account sign flipping, and that will, kind of have the calculations look at the account type. If you bring in, an account dimension or account member, and it needs to take into consideration whether it's an asset or a liability, for example. One thing you'll find in SAC as well is that these little eye or information icons, if you just hover over them, it's going to give you basic help information for that particular item. So take advantage of those. They always provide good information. So with that, now we get into our calculation area. Okay, so how we add our first item is by clicking the plus sign here, and then you are seeing where you can add a calculation, a repeat, in other words, some type of loop or condition, like an if statement. Maybe we need to delete some data, you would add a delete statement. But what I'm going to add here first is a comment, because I like to let the users, or maybe the person that comes after me, know what this calculation is really trying to do. So I'll just say we're going to seed budget data from, I'll just say prior year actual. In reality, you'd probably use a recent forecast or something. But once we hit enter, that comment is there. Now that that object is there, you can see that the plus sign is gone. But if you hover above it or below it, you can actually start to add things above or below it. So what we're going to do is we're going to add a calculation now. All right. So when we click on the calculation, you'll immediately get a warning sign that says it's not complete, and that's pretty obvious, so don't be alarmed about that. So if we look at this section here, what you're going to see is the target. So you think of the target as that's where we're going to write data to. That's the end result. That's our target. Okay. And we've kind of set where we want our target to go in this context up here. So I'm going to leave this set to all for now, because we've already set those parameters up here. So what I'm going to do now is, in addition to that, what other parameters do I need to calculate to write to this data region that I'm creating? So let's click on here. And what I want to do is I want to add a source scope. In other words, a source where I'm getting my information from to write to my target. So once I click on that, I don't want to take all, because right now it's set, it would just take all of this information. So that would not prove beneficial at all. So by clicking on all, I can add some parameters to my scoping, or some definition to my scoping, not to confuse it with the other parameters. So we can do something like, let's add the version that we're going to use as our source. I don't have a forecast version here, but I probably would use it if I had it. So I'll just use the year's actuals. And then also I want to kind of limit the time frame that I'm looking at. So I'm going to pull in date here, and I want to pull in a time scope selection function. So what I'm going to do here is I could choose previous, next, first period of the year, or previous year's last. I'm going to use previous, and I want to take the last 12 periods. Okay, and when it says previous, it's going to be previous based on what you have defined in your scope. Okay, so it's going to take the previous 12 periods before 2022. So that's exactly what we're looking for. So if we were to execute this data action now, all it would do is make an exact duplicate of the actuals from prior year and write that to our budget of the upcoming year. So we'd have identical information. But since we want our business to grow, we want to push the organization to do so, we want to add another expression here. We want to do some math, but I know it's counterintuitive, but we really don't want to add a mathematical expression. What we want to enter is an input field. So when I clicked on that, you could see it enters a plus sign and then just some random digits. If I click on the plus sign, you get the standard operators. I'm going to choose multiplication. And then I'm just going to change this here to 1.05 because I want a 5% growth. Okay. So what we will do at this point, now that we've created our calculation, is we'll save it. Okay. And before we jump over to actually execute this data action, the one thing that I wanted to show you is that this is where it can be helpful to learn. So we built this visually. If we click on script, you can see instantly what the script looks like that you generated. Okay. So coming back here and building out something visually, you can see, trying different things from the visual aspect and seeing what the results look like on the scripting side. So let's quickly jump over to a story that I've already created. I've already set up this table here. So I want to be able to show you how to create the data action trigger. So at the insert menu, you would go down to planning trigger, which is where you can select your data action trigger. And it's going to put one of these little blank triggers up on your screen. We can give it a label to seed the budget. Go from there, and I think I used the word demo in there. Did I? Nope. Yes, there it is. Vision right there. Okay, that should be our data action, advanced formula demo V1. Okay, so another thing that we need to be aware of is that when we run a data action, we could publish this data automatically. So I'm going to assume that most everyone understands what that term means, but for those that don't, I'll be quick. When you interact with SAC, if you change data, you run a data action, it's basically creating your own private version that only you can see until you would publish it so that the rest of the user base within that in the tenant here can see. So what we can do with data actions is actually do that publish step automatically. But if you want to have a step where you can look at the data first, then you want to leave this unpublished. So now that we've created that trigger, let's go here and run it. And I'm going to type in the word annual. I could also click over here and go and find this information, but I'm just going to go ahead and click run. So while that's running, and it'll run quick, you can see our actuals here, and we will soon see populated data here, and we can see that it has grown 5%. So I just put in a calculation here that did the math for us, okay? So yes, that's a simple calculation, but yes, we also did build it visually without any coding knowledge, and we seeded an entire budget. So that is something that someone, say, out in your business unit could easily do. However, if we look at the real world as far as business, we know that all of our business areas are not going to grow at 5%. So if you look at this, you can see these areas of business they're quite different. I mean, there's infrastructure, industrial, commercial, and private buildings. They're not going to all grow at 5%. Maybe infrastructure, because they're trying to, add infrastructure, spending from a governmental standpoint. The commercial buildings market is down, so maybe we want to change up things a little bit. So we can do that. We can make our data action more flexible. So let's do that. Let's go through and build a advanced formula step using the script and adding some interaction with our user here. So what we will do, you can add many steps here, but sometimes you want to not use a certain step. So one thing you can do is to highlight it and click on these little hashes here that comments it out. That basically renders that step inactive, okay? And we can save that just to ensure that. And so what I'm going to do now is just add another step. So I'll add this and say script, if I can type, and we'll say seed budget data. Okay. And we are not going to use the visual side. We are going to go directly to the script, and you'll see that it's kind of all commented out right now. And that's really with these little bookends here, the asterisk and the slash. If I take these out, you can see that the text here and the dimensions kind of illuminate, they become active, okay? So what we're gonna do here is, I'm gonna go through this a little bit quickly, but I want to make sure you also understand it. So I'm gonna kind of replicate this first line here. And what we're doing in this section is our member set, or our scoping. So what we're gonna do here, and this will show you how helpful the script editor is here. So if I just type the letter M, you can see things come up. in a list. It's like, okay, what do you really want? I could type another letter and okay, now it's narrowed it down. And when I hover over that, I get instant help or assistance on this. It tells me the syntax. It gives me some example code. It also will give me any remarks on maybe some special things I should know about it. So it's very helpful. And that will happen with most any of the things in the scripting tool here. So if I click on member set, just hit a space and I click the little bracket, it knows that you're going to be looking for a dimension to call out here. So see, the account is already there. I'm just pretty much replicating what's happening above there. So if I go then equal, it knows I'm going to look for an account. Now, a tip here too, if you're working on a Windows machine, I happen to be on a Mac, so I can't do it. But if you use the control space bar, you will get a list that just pops up automatically like this, or you could just start with a quote and just start typing. I just happen to see the account I want at the very top, but if I just started typing, you know, if you had variations of that, it would give you those, okay? So now you can see the whole syntax of that scoping for that account. I'm just gonna delete the one that was above it. Okay, so we are also going to look at the time here. And what we're going to do is look at the base member. And this is another thing that we can look at. You see all the context there. But what we're going to do is we need to look at the date for this as well. And we want to pull in this hierarchy. And I brought this up by just clicking on the period sign there. And again, I'm just going to type in those quotes and I'm going to type in 2022. All right, so good. So now we're sitting in a place where it looks very similar to where we're at with the visual side. Now I want to build out our calculation. So just like the visual side, if I just flip back up there, you can see data. There's nothing in there, which means it's really focusing on the entire script above or the scope above. But where we're going to add something is here. And just for the sake of time, I am going to just copy this so that we can just grab that and drop it over here. I think I copied the whole thing there. Okay, good. All right, so what we will do here then, since we are 15 minutes before, this will give us the same exact result as this, and we just built it out manually. Some people like working in this world, some people like working in this world, and you can get the same result by doing either, okay? So one thing I just did, now that I wrote my code, is I can click on this validate tool, this button up here, and it will go through and validate to make sure that I don't have any syntax errors, you know, I'm not missing a closed parenthesis or anything like that. So now instead of going through and rerunning the calculation, I'm just going to jump right into adding some parameters to this so that we can make it more user-friendly and more flexible. So let me go up to the top to add a parameter. Right now you can see that there's just a target version there. But what the first thing we're going to do is we're going to add a business area. I'll just say select BA. And we could add a member or a number here. And we're going to choose a member because we want to be able to select some specific members. We'll keep the default model. We'll choose the dimension, which is business area. And when it talks about cardinality, all it is do we want to limit the user to making one single selection, or can they choose anything? You know, a number of different selections. We can leave it to any. If we have multiple hierarchies, we could select one here, and we could also limit them to choosing certain levels of it as well. So this is what would actually show in the prompt. So I can leave that there for now, and we will leave that there. Let's also create something for the growth percentage so that the users can enter growth percentage. We'll go with that. We are going to enter a number this time. We'll keep the same default model, and you can see how the real estate below is kind of changed. I want to keep it dynamic. We could make it fixed and hard code a number in here. I'm going to put in 0.02 just so that they can see the format. And I can also say, enter percent as decimal. Okay, so now we have that set. Okay, so you can see it also has a couple different icons. You're choosing a dimension, choosing a number. Okay, so let's go back to our script here. Now we want to make this a little more dynamic. So what we can do here now is we can add some things here. We want to add something that limits the calculation in the scope to our given business area. So we can find that business area right there. And we want it to say, let's do it this way. We'll say equals base member, and we will keep it as business area. We'll go with the same parent ID, but over here, instead of putting in an ID, we're going to type a %, and it's going to bring up any parameter that we've already selected with that business area, okay? Or I'm sorry, created for that dimension. So we have that there. So this is going to create some interaction there where our users can enter something there. Now, what we want to do here, though, is in the calculation is to make this flexible. So we're going to take that 1.05 and we are going to say, hey, we want this to be 1 plus whatever that growth rate is. And again, contextually, it knows where we're at and what we're doing. We're not working with a specific dimension, so it assumes we're looking at a number. So we're doing that, selecting that, and closing that. Okay, so now that we made some changes, let's validate that. Great, no issues there. We'll go ahead and save it. And let's go back and jump over to our data action. And let's say that our infrastructure, since we know that there's going to be more public spending on that, we're going to increase that a little bit. Now, remember, last time we ran this, all we had here was the target version. But since we had parameters, now we get additional areas to enter data. So what we're going to do here, since we want to make infrastructure like 10%, just going to follow the instructions, enter as a decimal, and I want to do it just for infrastructure. So I'll choose infrastructure and I'll run that. So now that I've run that, you can see infrastructure now has a 10% growth rate. And since I focused the calculation only on infrastructure, nothing else has changed. Okay, so you can see already start to see the benefit of that. So if we look at these others, we can keep industrial at 5. We know that, like I said earlier, commercial is expected to go down. So let's make that like go down 2%. And I know I chose the last one before, but I can also type in there. So let's do that. We'll click that and get that calculated. Okay, so you can see that's at 2%. We'll also bump up those private buildings because I think that's where the money's going as far as building goes next year. And let's make that 0.75. So now what we've done is we've changed the mix of all that growth, but we're still at the same 5% total overall. So the leaders of these business areas are probably happier with that because it's more realistic to their particular areas of the business and how they are interacting with the economic factors that they are involved with. So that is how you can add the flexibility to your data action, to your advanced formula. Again, I've had clients where we add so many parameters, and I'm not saying this in a bad way, it's just because there are a lot of parameters to use in a data action, or can be, and we will have 7 or 8 parameters that a user can enter. It really depends on your business need. Okay. I was going to show one more derivative of this. We could also make the item more flexible, where we could add a derivative in here where we could choose the date and make it more flexible. I really dislike hard coding information into advanced formulas because that renders them as more of a single use type of formula. But what we can do here is we can add in something for the date, and we can look at, and we can actually focus on different properties of different dimensions to use in another dimension. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a date range here. So I'm going to use the version of first month, and I'm going to go to that version so you can see it, and it will make sense at that point. Dot and last month. Okay. All right, so I happen to have that up here. So what I'm doing is I'm calling the version dimension. And in our version dimension in our model, you can see the annual budget version. So what's my date range that I've entered for these properties here? So you can see it's really going to accomplish the same thing we did by hard coding it. It's going to get the same exact result, except that if we have to do this, create this data action for all different areas of the P&L or the business, and replicate this data action numerous times, to update that hard-coded date would be very cumbersome, take a lot of time. Where what we could do is have the administrator of the model come in here and change the dates, and then these dates automatically in every single data action that has this range in there will update automatically. So just to recap, we built a very, very basic data action using a visual tool. We've also seen how that visual tool can translate into actual code so that we can learn from that. And we've also built that same data action from scratch using the scripting method. And then we took that another level by adding parameters, adding things that the users can interact with, and also how we can make it more flexible for everyone over the long term, so that these data actions can be reused and reused year after year, cycle after cycle. So yes, the calculations were simple, but these also provide you the foundation for building very complex formulas. There are a lot of similarities to what we've looked at here. We can also add if statements to these, some conditions. We can also loop transactions using for each statements, such as this here. Again, it's gonna, if you just type something in, it's gonna give you examples, give you the context. This is gonna allow us to maybe loop through some different accounts that we've scoped in our member setup here. So different things that you can do. And frankly, to me, I know I'm a finance person that's kind of geeked out on this. So this stuff makes me, gets me excited that I can automate a lot of the processes that are used in the forecast and planning area of our businesses. So with that, I would like to conclude here unless there are any questions. Lauren, did you see any questions out there? I have not had a chance to take a look. Okay, I see some now. Yeah, I see one from, okay, Joseph has 3 questions in here. Is it doing a current month minus 12? Yes, since we looked at the, let me get to this right here. Since we were looking at the base member of 2022, it's establishing all 12 periods of that year. So that data set is going to have the detail of all 12 of those periods. So what we're asking it to do by using that previous is to step it back to each one of those periods and write it into the current year, okay? And yes, the video will be shared. I believe that's going to be made available online tomorrow. Also, if you need a copy of the PowerPoint deck, there is some additional information. I do have some links and some things that are very helpful for advanced formulas in the SAP Help, and also things that you can Google to get some help and get you started. So with that, I'd like to thank everyone for joining. If you have additional questions or want to reach out to me directly, please feel free to do so. You could contact Lauren directly, well, if you do not have my contact information. So with that, I thank you for joining, and that's all for today. Lauren, did you have anything else?
Nope, that's all. Thanks so much, Dan. Great job.
Thanks. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Take care.